Hi everyone, welcome back for day 4 of Yoga and Tarot Spring Equinox Retreat. I am so excited today to talk to you about the Major Arcana. So I know the last few days we've talked about Minor Arcana, all of the suits, the pip cards, the court cards. Today we're just gonna add on a little bit talking about the Major. So just to give you a little brief overview of Minor Arcana versus Major Arcana. So the Minor Arcana, when you look at those cards, you're really dealing with day-to-day life events, right? Things that are pretty commonplace, challenges, relationships, workplace, career, all of these things that we might see time to time in day-to-day life. When you look at the Major Arcana, there's an element more of one of spirit, right? So we talked about those 5 elements, 4 of them showing up in the Minor Arcana. The 5th one being spirit is representative of the Major Arcana as a whole. So the Major Arcana, I like to think about this sort of spiritual level, this next step, this like leveling up. And not that they're more important or more significant than the Minor Arcana cards, but they represent larger archetypes and more broader, sort of like higher level archetypes and themes. So when I do a reading and with all my cards and I have Minor Arcana cards and Major Arcana cards show up, I pay attention to all, but I pay extra attention to the Major Arcana just because there's like this added significance of that major and kind of how it relates to the rest of the cards that show up in the reading. So I'm going to walk you through just each card briefly, but before I do that, the Major Arcana, it's 22 cards and it starts with the Fool and then it ends with the World. And the Major Arcana is typically referred to as the Fool's Journey. So if you think about the Major Arcana separately, it's sort of like this epic journey, right? This epic journey that a person or one is going on throughout life. And it's one that's on a spiritual level, potentially unconscious level, one that's maybe even outside of ourselves. So we start with the Fool. And then after the Fool, we have these 3 levels to this journey. So the first level deals with the next 7 cards of the Major Arcana. So from the Magician up through the Chariot. And those 7 cards are on what we call the conscious level. So it's still dealing with life problems, but more like outer problems, right? Maybe a little bit bigger than the kind of challenges we saw in the Minor Arcana. But that's the conscious level we deal with in those first 7 cards following the Fool. The next 7 cards are the Strength card up through Temperance. And these are on the subconscious level. Now, these cards really just relate to self-knowledge, transformation, maybe a desire to better ourselves, right? So those are what's going on in the subconscious level, just a bit deeper. And then on the 3rd and final level, it's the super conscious level. And this is the Devil all the way to the final card, the World. And these cards are on a deeper sense of spirit. It's really outside ourselves. It's dealing with the cosmos, dealing with the collective, right? Getting kind of away from just ourselves and what's going on maybe in the world around us. So I'm going to walk through each one of these cards just real briefly, give you a little picture of my deck and talk briefly to each element. But again, take this for what you will. I know there's a lot of information in here. You can always take from it whatever you want, leave what you don't, look up more if you're curious, and just allow yourself to play. So starting off with the Fool, as I mentioned, the Fool's Journey. So each of the cards also deal with numerology as well. The Fool is the start of the journey, so really it represents 0. So not really a numerology associated with it, but it's the start of a journey. You can see there's an element of excitement, but also a little bit of danger, right? This figure's about to walk off a cliff and the dog is looking up, kind of like, what are you doing? But at the same time, this figure is naive. They're excited. There's a sense of no fear, right? Nothing holding this figure back. So starting off on this epic journey without any fear or anything at all to hold back, for better or worse. And then the next card is the Magician. So this is the first card in the Fool's Journey. So it represents the number 1. And if you think about number 1 from numerology, we talked about creation, right? About beginnings. The Magician also in this card, you'll notice, has all 4 elements represented. And it's really dealing with expertise, skill, very cunning, the Magician. A lot of light, a lot of yang energy and action. Next is the High Priestess. This card is beautiful. It deals a lot with intuition. This space sort of between the conscious and the unconscious, mysterious, right? Maybe secrets that have yet to be revealed, whether known or unknown to yourself or to others. Deals a lot with intuition. This card comes up a lot in dealing with intuition. So a really interesting card, especially in the theme of this week. Next is the Empress. The Empress is a beautiful card. You can see there's a lot of nature. The Empress is typically seen as mothering, as nurturing, as also creation, right? Some of the cards depict, or some of the tarot, readings about the Empress suggest a person that is pregnant. So deals a lot with fertility, with creation, with abundance, and really this nurturing figure. The Emperor. So the Emperor is more of the yang version of the Empress. So you can think back to Queen and Kings, right? Not quite the same, but this sort of more yang energy here. The Emperor is signified by the number 4. We talked a lot about 4 being stability, security, but at the same time, it can lead toward being too rigid, right? Being too stuck in your own ways. But you can think about that sense of the Emperor in terms of having a lot of structure and authority. And then we have the Hierophant. The Hierophant, as you notice in most of the cards, will have these 2 fingers up toward the sky, which signifies as above, so is below. And really, the Hierophant deals with spirituality, with wisdom. It can also deal with sort of the way of doing things, right? The path that's laid out in front of you. So I think often of like religious institutions when I think of the Hierophant. So just coming into this idea of higher authority, right? Something above us, this wisdom, but also maybe this path that's been set for us, and us kind of deciding, is that the path we want to take? Next, we have the Lovers card. So the Lovers card is one based on balance, right? This yin and yang. You see this figure in between these 2 other figures. It's the sort of male and female energies combined. There's a possibility of relationship that shows up in this card, but it doesn't have to be about external relationships. It can also be about unity within yourself. It can also be about choice, right? You can sort of see there's these 2, almost like they're deciding, like maybe you have a choice between 2 lovers or 2 major choices, right? 2 doesn't have to be lover people, but maybe loves of your life or things in your life you're trying to make a choice between. So finding that unity within to make that choice. And then the 7th card of the first level of consciousness is the Chariot. The Chariot typically illustrates this sense of victory, this sense of overcoming difficulties, right? So in this card in particular, the figure is sort of, trying to balance between these 2 horses going 2 different directions. You've got a sense of achievement in the first level of this physical world, right? This first level of the conscious level of the major arcana. So there's a sense of purpose, of finding direction and discipline, of seeking truth and really taking the reins of your life and taking the reins of your destiny. We move into the 2nd level, the unconscious level. So this next level, there's some cards that, depending on the deck, might shift into different order. But from what I've learned in one of the studies I've done is that the next card would be strength. And in some decks, strength shows up a little bit later and it's switched with a couple other cards. So just take notice of that. It's not necessarily right or wrong, just different in different decks. But for the elements of this, strength is represented by the number 8. Strength is a cardinal virtue. It's all about mastery. If you see like there's this calmness of this figure in front of this lion with its open mouth and big teeth, it's really about finding this internal strength of being in control of situations, of having endurance, right? Surmounting any type of difficulty with this mastery of yourself. Next, we have the Hermit. I love the Hermit. The Hermit is such a reflective card. It's one of self-contemplation or self-study, right? It's this idea of self-knowledge, of really closing yourself off from the world to pursue this self-knowledge. I'm sure a lot of us spent some time feeling like the hermit in the last year, but it can be really, really productive and helpful to spend time with just yourself to really develop your sense of self. And then the 10th card, the next one is the Wheel of Fortune. The Wheel of Fortune really just represents the fact that sometimes in life we're up, sometimes in life we're down, and it's just, a constant wheel. There's never really a rhyme or reason for why, but sometimes we find ourselves at the top of that wheel. Sometimes we find ourselves at the bottom, making our way up, making our way down. It's just sort of the circle of life, right? Of this endless cycle of reincarnation, of just knowing life is up and down. Next, we have Justice. Justice deals with balance. It deals with fairness, equity, equilibrium, right? You see there's a sword there. They refer to this as the sword of truth. This card can deal with like having an important decision. It could be a legal matter. It could be just one of importance or of just trying to do the right thing. That's the Justice card. Next, we have the Hanged Man, which in my other deck is called the Hanged Woman. But the hanged figure, as you see, there's an element of surrender, right? But if you look closely at the card, the figure doesn't look scared or upset, right? It's simply one of surrender, of letting go. It can refer to sacrifice, but maybe one that is necessary, a need to let go, to shift your perspective, a necessary release. Next, we have Death. Death often seems like a scary card, right? And it can. If you look at the imagery on this card, you see like this Grim Reaper, you see figures down on the ground, but really death deals again with sacrifice. That when you release something, it brings about an ending, but again, it's a necessary ending. It's one of letting go, to then find transformation, to find change. So it's this transition point, because at the end of one thing is just the beginning of another. And then the final card of this level of the subconscious is the Temperance card. So the Temperance is another cardinal virtue, right? So we started with the cardinal virtue of strength. We end with another cardinal virtue of temperance. You see there's elements of water and of earth. It's really about healing, about renewal. It's calming, detoxing, right? It's about balance and moderation, and a lot of elements of new life. So now we move into the third and final level, which is the super conscious level. Again, one that's more outside ourselves, dealing with the cosmos, dealing with the outworld and the collective. So we have the Devil. Again, the Devil can appear to be a super negative card, but it doesn't necessarily have negative meaning, right? It depends how it shows up, how you relate to the card. So if you look at the elements of this card, you see the figures below are in chains. And really, this is about noticing what it is you're chained to, right? So it could be like an imbalance of sorts. Maybe you're chained to your phone and you're too often or more often than you'd like to be on social media, scrolling. Maybe it's something else that's in balance, right? But noticing what it is that has power over you and how you can take that power back. So knowing that, not to feel shamed by it, right? There's an element of shame in this card, but really noticing where you can harness that power that's maybe overtaken you and just get that power back for yourself. Next, we have the Tower. So the Tower really represents upheaval. It represents unexpected change, right? Really big change on this massive scale. But at the same time, it's one that we don't always have total control over. So, I'm sure many of us have felt this massive upheaval at some point in our lives, but you might think of a time where it was maybe massive upheaval, but maybe it was a necessary one, and maybe in the end too, it ended up being a really positive one. So the Tower doesn't have to be negative. It's really about, like I said, a necessary upheaval, one of major change that, is disruptive, but potentially welcoming. Now we have the Star. The Star, so you'll see often in the Star card this beautiful star figure, or star, and then you'll see this figure usually of a naked figure, and you notice the two pouring of the water, right? And so this has to deal with healing, with bright optimism, bright prospects for the future, inspiration. Also the Star, in most of the decks, the Star will have 8 points on this star. And you think about stars being primarily used for navigation. Think about this as like a bright light to look toward to navigate where you're going next, which is positive and full of wonderful things. The Moon. The Moon is next in the card, and the Moon really deals with this sense of night or lack of light, right? This darkness. The Moon is very mysterious. It deals a lot with our emotional state, right? And also deals with our intuition, with our instincts. In the Moon card, when I draw the Moon card, oftentimes I like to, if I have a decision I need to make, but one of the options is to not make a decision, do that. Don't make a decision if you pull the Moon card. It's really about sort of going with the flow, right? There's a lot of uncertainty, a lot you don't quite know yet, which isn't necessarily bad, but it's just sort of keeping with what's going on and really trusting your intuition. The Sun. The sun is beautiful, and I love this little babe sitting on the horse with a bright, beautiful sun. The sun represents clarity of vision, bright light, very joyful, a lot of happiness, extremely positive card, exuberant, bright, full of life, full of light. And then we have Judgment. Judgment is about positive rebirth. It's about improvement. It's about following your bliss and just finding this new chapter, this positive up-leveling, right? If you can see, they're reaching to the heavens. It can be a little bit misleading, the name Judgment, but I think about the elements of the card and the illustration of the card as being like Judgment Day, right? And being a day of rebirth, of renewal in religious institutions and religious historical contexts. So think about judgment as not necessarily like judging yourself, judging others, but thinking more about this fact that like the day has come for rebirth in that sense of the world. Taking stock of your journey, taking stock of that and celebrating it. And then last but not least, we have the final card, the World. Now the World is completion. It's reward, it's success, it's fulfillment of this massive epic journey you have been on, right? There's recognition, there's travel, there's universe, there's the globe, all of these things you can think of in the sense of the world. On the card, you'll see that there are the 4 fixed signs are represented on here. You've got this culmination of full consciousness, this culmination of the path of enlightenment, reaching self-actualization, right? The ultimate goal. You can also notice, you think about the world and this circular shape, it's like a wheel, like karma, like experiences of life. If you also look at the figure at the center, it's really reminiscent of the hanged person upside down, right? So you can consider there that sense of surrender through all of it brought this figure right side up, brought them the culmination of the journey. So that gives you a very brief look at all of the cards of the major arcana. Now again, a suggestion if you want to get a little bit deeper into the major arcana cards is you can separate those from your deck, and you can just allow yourself to shuffle just the major arcana, and then, you know, do your simple, what am I wanting to focus on today, or use one of the journal prompts and pull one of the major arcanas, and then just see what comes up. Another option, if you want to work with the major arcana, is to shuffle the cards without really asking a specific question, but pulling a card that comes to you. And when you pull that card, maybe simply reflect on a life experience that relates to that card, right? So you might pull the Wheel of Fortune, and maybe in the Wheel of Fortune, you think about and reflect on your life when you've had an experience that is similar to the Wheel of Fortune, when you felt that you were either at the top or the bottom or somewhere in between, or when you just realized that that was a part of life, that there are numerous ups and downs. Okay, so again, take from this what you will, but I hope you enjoy learning a little bit more about the major arcana, and I will see you again tomorrow for day 5. Have a great day.